Hello, America. I believe our country is in serious trouble, and I'm here to offer a solution. I propose adding an amendment to the Constitution, Amendment 28 by current count, that creates a fourth branch of government. As with the other three branches, our fourth branch will access the very core, the wellspring of constitutional authority, and be dedicated to transforming the will of the people into political reality as simply and directly as possible. It will be called the Populist Branch and known as the People's House. Now, our country, the world, has changed profoundly since the drafting of our Constitution. No longer must representatives spend days or weeks traveling to give us a voice at the seat of government. Today, with our current commonly employed technology, we can all be there, in Washington, right now, easily and conveniently. Therefore, Amendment 28 authorizes the use of electronic online voting and the logistical requirements to make it so. Actions by the People's House will be realized by simple Democratic majority vote tallied by a national registrar. Decisions so rendered thus become the law of the land. So, with the People's House established and our new electronic voting system in place, what shall we do with our newfound constitutional prowess? Three things. First, legislate. Our Congress has become paralyzed by gridlock. Legislators motivated by self-interest lack the political will to address the critical issues facing our country. At our peril, they simply are not getting the job done. Therefore, Amendment 28 grants the People's House independent, comprehensive legislative power and the authority to create its own legislative agenda as overseen by a dedicated committee. Second, governmental arbiter. Bills passed by Congress are routinely laden with compromises, lobbyist influence, and backroom deals that convolute the original intention. Often, these bills are not adequately studied or even read by those who pass them. We deserve better. Our president issues orders unchallenged that affect the whole country, some of which are based on questionable constitutional authority. We should remember that the president works for us. He is our employee, and as his boss, it's appropriate for us to say, "Not so fast. Let's have a look at that first." Meanwhile, the Supreme Court makes profoundly impactful decisions while often bitterly divided. If our greatest legal minds can't function with more than an 11% margin of agreement, then their wisdom is far from assured. I say let the people decide in a court of common sense. Therefore, per Amendment 28, all actions by the legislative, executive, and judicial branches will require final authorization by the People's House before going forward. In addition, all prior governmental actions are open to review and reconsideration by the People's House. Further, because the actions of the People's House demonstrate the clear will of the people, they do not require presidential or congressional approval, nor will they be subject to executive veto or judicial challenge. The sole exception to this is in the case of an imminent threat to our national security by a foreign power. Third, budgetary comptroller. Now, our federal government proves to be ever expanding with a budget to match funding untold entities while producing an equally ever expanding national debt. A debt that, at the end of the day, we the people will be held accountable for. To witness this unprecedented level of fiscal irresponsibility threaten our nation and stand by powerless is unacceptable. Therefore, Amendment 28 grants the People's House dominion over all federal and national entities and their respective budgetary expenditures. All agencies, departments, the Federal Reserve, and every check issued by the United States Treasury will be subject to approval or disapproval by the People's House and/or its appointed agents. To summarize, Amendment 28 creates a fourth branch of government, the Populist Branch known as the People's House, dedicated to the empowerment of the people. Electronic online voting is authorized along with all logistical requirements. Actions by the People's House are realized by simple Democratic majority vote tallied by a national registrar. The results then become the law of the land. Amendment 28 grants the People's House independent, comprehensive legislative power and the authority to create its own legislative agenda overseen by a dedicated committee. All actions by the legislative, executive, and judicial branches require final authorization by the People's House before going forward, except in the case of an imminent threat to the national security by a foreign power. All prior governmental actions are open to review and reconsideration by the People's House. Actions by the People's House do not require presidential or congressional approval and are not subject to executive veto or judicial challenge. The People's House will have dominion over all foreign and national entities and related budgetary expenditures. Actions by all agencies, departments, the Federal Reserve System, and the United States Treasury will be subject to approval or disapproval by the People's House and or its appointed agents. Allow me now to walk you through a day with Amendment 28. It's Tuesday, voting day. I take out my national ID card, which contains a permanent read-only memory chip embedded with a digitized copy of my certified original birth certificate, high school diploma, college diplomas, and honorable discharge from the United States Army, along with other permanent, non-changing documentation. I even have my original Social Security card. Also permanently embedded is my biometric information, including fingerprints and facial recognition. On read-write memory is my voter's registration and current residential address, along with other information I may choose to add, all securely encoded. With App 28 installed, my card and my smartphone communicate. My phone sees the facial recognition information and scans my face, assuring that the person holding the phone is in fact the person represented on the card. It also confirms that I am a registered legal voter, and so, accessing the People's House website, I am cleared to vote. There are 4 pages on the ballot. On the first page are 3 legislative actions initiated by the People's House. During the previous week, I have reviewed each of these actions on the federally sponsored media channels. Each topic is discussed in detail from varying perspectives and is available on demand, so I can review this information at my convenience. The content on these channels is highly scrutinized for accuracy and is subject to strict time constraints. They are also edited to assure they remain focused and on task, and that the production budgets remain minimal and consistent among all participants. While I may research topics elsewhere, I trust these channels for truthfulness and accuracy. It is an important part of the process. Having properly educated myself regarding these issues at hand, I cast my vote. On the second page are actions taken by the other 3 branches. There are 2 executive orders, 1 piece of congressional legislation, and a ruling by the Supreme Court. Having properly informed myself of these actions, I cast my ballot as to which of these I allow to go forward and which I deny. On the third page are several topics to be considered for a vote in the near future, plus an opportunity for a write-in topic. I will select 5, including my write-ins, should I so choose, and number them in order of importance. The last page is the province of the People's House watchdog team, dedicated to deconstructing prior legislation, isolating unrelated add-ons, and seeking out the most egregious abuses of tax money for termination. Each comes with a description per the original legislation. I review their findings and vote accordingly. There, I'm done. I have participated in conducting the country's business free of gridlock, lobbyists, partisan politics, or special interests. The will of the people prevails and the national interest is served. The votes will then be tallied electronically by the National Registrar, another obviously critical job. Results will be emailed to me and may also be made available on the People's House website and through the general media. Tomorrow, I will begin reviewing next week's legislative agenda. I like the sound of that, conducting the country's business, but how do we get there from here? Per Article 5 of the Constitution, for our amendment to become reality, it must be proposed in both houses of Congress by a 2/3 vote and then ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures. Now that may sound like a daunting task, but do remember that it's congressmen, representatives, senators we're talking about here, politicians, one and all, people whose very job description, whose duty it is to represent us. It's what we pay them to do. We need to help them by making sure they know exactly what it is we expect them to do. We must speak to them boldly, clearly, with a unified voice and in undeniable numbers. Then when faced with overwhelming popular demand for this amendment, when they feel the groundswell of our determination, I believe they'll quickly find an incentive to join the team and become a conspicuous part of the solution. Which brings us to the present. What is needed to go forward to bring that single unified voice together? The short answer is you, involved. If you'd like to see this amendment become a reality, take action, spread the word. If you have the skill or resources that would help move this project forward, pitch in, join. If you have the financial wherewithal to be a contributor, do. Any amount helps. And know that once we are successful, the real work begins, because we will have all just taken on a new part-time job running the country, and we'll be busy. And then think of this. If we are successful at making this work on a national level, there's no reason it can't work on the state and local levels. Further, if we are successful here in America, we may be seen as an example in other countries around the world. Do indulge yourself for just a moment to consider such a world run by the people themselves, where no one, no thing, no governmental entity stands above the will of the people. I like the sound of that too. In closing, let's remind ourselves that this is our country, it's our Constitution. We can change it if we want to, and if we feel our country has lost its way, become misdirected, imperiled, then I believe we have an obligation, moreover a patriotic duty, to take action and make things right. And that's why I'm here. I'm Jim Lefevre. Let's save the country.